Billionaire gave $1 to the boy who sold candy. You look just like my dad. He turned around and froze. Before starting to watch this story, tell us in the comments section from which city you're watching this story. Let's enjoy this story. The wind carried the early chill of autumn through the streets of downtown Chicago, brushing against the cracked sidewalks and echoing through the alleyways like a whisper from the past. Among the hundreds of busy footsteps that shuffled along Michigan Avenue, one pair belonged to a boy who looked too small for the weight he carried. His name was Noah, 10 years old, with tangled brown hair that peeked out from under a faded knit cap and eyes that had seen far more than his years should allow. Clutching a plastic grocery bag filled with assorted candy bars, purchased in bulk from a discount store across town, Noah stood near the corner of East Lake Street, just a block away from Millennium Park, trying his best to look cheerful as he held up a small cardboard sign. "Candy $1, help me help my mom." Most people passed by without so much as a glance. A few smiled sympathetically, but their eyes quickly darted away, and their hands remained tucked in their coat pockets. Some gave him a wide berth, suspicious of scams or simply unwilling to be pulled out of their own routines. Noah had learned not to take it personally. His mom always told him that everyone was fighting their own battle, and not everyone had the energy or the heart to stop and help someone else. He believed her, but it still stung every time someone looked through him like he was invisible. It was his 4th day selling candy after school. He didn't like doing it, not because he was ashamed, but because it meant leaving his mother alone in their cramped apartment on West Madison Street. Her multiple sclerosis had progressed rapidly over the last year, making even short walks painful and exhausting. The hospital bills were relentless, and though she received some assistance, it was never enough. Noah had tried odd jobs around the neighborhood, shoveling snow, mowing lawns, but candy sales gave the fastest return, especially in the tourist-heavy downtown area. His goal was simple: raise $50 a week to help cover groceries and maybe pick up her medicine on time for once. Just as the sun began its slow descent, casting golden light on the city's steel and glass towers, Noah spotted a man stepping out of a sleek black Cadillac Escalade. The man was tall, dressed in a gray wool coat over a navy blue suit, and his polished shoes clicked sharply against the pavement as he approached. He looked out of place among the casual tourists and office workers. More like someone who belonged in a corner office on the top floor of a high-rise. Noah raised his sign a little higher and took a hopeful step forward. "Excuse me, sir. Would you like to buy some candy?" "Just $1. The man paused. His eyes, a stormy blue, settled on Noah's face with an intensity that made the boy shift nervously. But then the man's features softened, and he reached into his coat pocket. "Candy, huh?" he asked, his voice low but not unkind. He pulled out a crisp dollar bill and handed it to Noah, who immediately dug into his bag and offered a chocolate bar in return. "You can keep it," the man said, waving off the candy with a faint smile. "Use it for whatever you need." Noah's fingers froze mid-air, the chocolate still in his hand. There was something strange about the man's face, familiar in a way that stirred something deep in his memory. He couldn't help but blurt out the thought that had just rushed into his mind. "You look just like my dad." The words hung in the air, more fragile than snowflakes. The man, already turning to walk away, stopped in his tracks. Slowly he turned back around, and for a brief second his expression twisted into something Noah couldn't quite understand: shock, confusion, maybe even fear. The man's hand fell to his side, and his eyes searched Noah's face with such intensity that the boy instinctively took a step back. "What did you say?" the man asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Noah, now uncertain if he had said something wrong, repeated it hesitantly. "You look just like my dad. At least, from the pictures." The man's lips parted slightly as if he wanted to speak but had forgotten how. A gust of wind blew between them, rustling the candy wrappers inside Noah's bag. For a moment, neither of them moved. The noise of the city, the honking horns, the chatter of pedestrians, the distant rumble of the L train, seemed to fade away. It was just the two of them, suspended in some quiet thread of time. Then just as suddenly the man snapped out of it. He cleared his throat, adjusted his coat collar and muttered, "Sorry kid. Gotta go." Without another word, he turned and walked briskly away, disappearing into the crowd. Noah stood still for a long moment, confused and a little unsettled. He wasn't sure why he had said what he did. He had only seen one or two faded pictures of his dad, who had left before Noah could walk, and the resemblance had been like a sudden flash of lightning, striking deep and then gone. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe it was just wishful thinking. But the look on that man's face, it didn't feel like nothing. As he packed up his bag and counted the small pile of crumpled bills in his pocket, He glanced once more down the street where the man had vanished. Something told him that this wasn't the last time they would cross paths. And deep down, he felt the first stirrings of a story much bigger than his candy bag or his cardboard sign. Something was beginning. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. The next day, the sky over Chicago was heavy with clouds, casting a dull grayness over the city that matched the strange feeling Noah couldn't shake from the day before. He hadn't told his mother about the man, at least not yet. She had enough on her mind with her pain and the pills she rationed to stretch until the next prescription refill. But in his head, the moment kept replaying like a scene from a movie. The way the man turned around. The way he froze when Noah mentioned his dad. It wasn't just surprise. It was recognition, fear, maybe even guilt. Noah didn't know exactly what it meant, but it left a knot in his chest that refused to loosen. That morning, Noah packed his candy bars into the same plastic bag, slipped on his jacket and gloves, and told his mom he was going out early. She smiled weakly from the couch, where she spent most of her time now, and reminded him to wear his scarf. He nodded, kissed her forehead, and quietly closed the door behind him. The bus ride downtown felt longer than usual. He stared out the window, trying to convince himself that he was being ridiculous. Lots of people probably looked like his dad. It didn't mean anything. Still, he knew exactly where he was going, back to the same spot near Michigan Avenue where he had seen the man. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was curiosity. Either way, something inside him said the man would come back. By the time Noah reached the corner, the lunchtime crowd was beginning to spill onto the sidewalks. Businessmen hurried between meetings, tourists took photos near Cloud Gate, and food vendors shouted out specials from their carts. Noah set himself up just where he had been the day before, holding up his candy $1 sign and offering smiles to every passerby. He sold a few bars to a couple from Ohio and a jogger who didn't stop but tossed a crumpled $5 bill into his hand. But he wasn't really thinking about the candy. His eyes scanned the street, the sidewalk, the doorway of the same hotel where the man had come from. Hours passed. The chill seeped into his toes, but he didn't leave. At about 3 in the afternoon, just when he began to lose hope, the Escalade pulled up again. Noah's heart skipped a beat as the same man stepped out, checking his watch and walking toward the hotel entrance. He looked just as sharply dressed, though this time his face looked a little more tired, like something had been weighing on him. Noah hesitated only a moment before stepping forward again. "Hi, sir," he said, offering his best smile. "Still selling candy?" "Same deal." The man stopped. This time his reaction was slower, more guarded. He looked down at Noah and gave a short nod. "You again," he said. "I remembered this was your spot," Noah replied. "You said to keep the dollar yesterday. I just wanted to say thanks." The man looked like he wanted to walk away. But something held him there. He studied Noah's face, his eyes, his nose, his jawline, and then looked down at the bag of candy. "You doing this alone?" "My mom's sick," Noah said without hesitation. "She can't work anymore. So I sell these after school. It helps." The man blinked. There was a long silence, broken only by the buzz of the street around them. Then, without warning, the man asked, "What's your name?" "Noah," he said. The man paused as if tasting the name. "Noah what?" "Noah Bennett." The man flinched barely, but Noah caught it. His throat moved like he had swallowed something bitter. Then he nodded. "That's a strong name." Noah tilted his head. "What's yours?" The man looked around, hesitated, then said, "Elliot." He didn't offer a last name. Just Elliot. Then he cleared his throat, glanced at the hotel and said, "Listen kid, it's cold. Let me buy you a cup of hot chocolate." Noah wasn't sure if he should go, but something about Elliot didn't feel dangerous. Just complicated. He nodded slowly. "Okay." They went into the coffee shop across the street, the kind of place Noah had never been inside. The warm scent of roasted beans and cinnamon filled the air. Elliot ordered 2 hot chocolates and sat across from Noah in a corner booth. For the first few minutes, neither of them spoke. Then Noah said softly, "You really do look like my dad." Elliot stared into his cup, then looked up. "Tell me about him." Noah shrugged. "I don't know much. He left before I could remember. My mom has a couple pictures. She says he wasn't ready to be a dad. Said he wanted a different life." Elliot looked down again, and this time, his hands shook just slightly as he held the cup. "Your mom's name?" "Lena," Noah replied. "Lena Bennett." Elliot closed his eyes. Just for a second. But when he opened them, there was something different in them, pain, regret, and a quiet kind of fear. He took a deep breath. "Noah, I knew Alina once. Years ago. In Minneapolis. We were in college together. Noah's pulse quickened. That's where we used to live. She moved here a few years ago after she got sick. Elliot leaned back, like the air had been knocked out of him. He looked at Noah again, really looked. And this time there was no denying it. I think I might be your father. Noah's heart pounded so hard he felt dizzy. He didn't know what to say, didn't know if he believed it, but in that moment, everything made sense. The man's face, his reaction yesterday, the way he looked at him. But it was too much. Too sudden. Elliot saw the look in his eyes and softened. I don't know for sure. But if you'll let me, I'd like to find out. Noah nodded slowly. He wasn't sure what this meant or what came next. But something told him this was just the beginning. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. Noah sat on the edge of his bed that night, staring at the cup of cold cocoa he'd brought home in a to-go cup. The paper had gone soggy, and a dark ring had formed on the wooden nightstand, but he couldn't bring himself to move it. His mother had fallen asleep early, tired from the day, unaware that Noah's entire world had tilted in a direction he didn't understand. He had met a man who might be his father. Not a fantasy, not a name in an old photo. An actual man with a name, a voice, a past. Elliot. The name echoed in Noah's mind like the first note of a song he hadn't heard in years. Every part of the story his mom had ever told him came alive in a new way. The college in Minneapolis. The short-lived love. The sudden departure. She'd never told him the name, but now he wondered if it had been too painful for her. Or if she had tried to forget. The next morning he woke early despite hardly sleeping. There were no sales today, no candy bags. Instead he caught the bus alone and returned to the same street, hoping it wasn't a dream. Hoping Elliot would show up again. And he did. This time, Elliot wasn't in a rush. He wore a dark wool coat and leaned against the hotel's front steps, like he'd been waiting. When he saw Noah, he straightened, almost unsure whether to smile. I thought maybe you wouldn't come, he said. Noah shrugged. I almost didn't, he admitted. But then I figured I should know the truth. They walked again, not to the coffee shop this time, but through Grant Park, where the trees stood bare and the paths were slick with a thin layer of frost. They walked in silence for a while, passing joggers and dog walkers. Then Elliot said quietly, I haven't seen Lena in almost 14 years. We were just kids when we met. I was working 2 jobs and trying to stay in school. She was the smart one. Strong. And stubborn. Noah smiled. She still is. I wanted to be something, Elliot continued. I thought I needed to make it big before I could take care of a family. So when I got the offer to move to New York, I took it. I didn't say goodbye the right way. And I never checked back. I always told myself I'd reach out. One day. When things settled. When I had something to show for my life. Noah glanced at him. Did you know she was pregnant? Elliot stopped walking. His breath came out in a thick cloud. No. I swear to you I didn't. If I had known, I wouldn't have left like that. I would have? He shook his head. I don't know what I would have done, but I wouldn't have disappeared. There was a bench nearby and they sat. Noah felt the weight of the moment settle on his chest. She never badmouthed you. Not once. She just said you weren't ready. Elliot leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I wasn't. But I wish I had been. They sat there for a long while, watching the lake in the distance shimmer beneath the winter sun. Finally Elliot said, I want to do this right, Noah. If you'll let me, I'd like to be part of your life. Not just from a distance. Noah bit his lip. I don't want anything fake. You won't get fake from me, Elliot said. I've made a lot of mistakes. Built businesses, made money, lost time I can't get back. But I've never wanted to fix anything more than I want to fix this. Noah nodded slowly. We'd need to talk to my mom. Of course, Elliot said quickly. I'd never go behind her back. They planned it for the weekend. A dinner. Somewhere simple. Elliot offered to bring food so Lena wouldn't have to cook. When Noah told her, she went silent for a long time. Then she whispered, Elliot? Noah nodded. He didn't know. He says he didn't know about me. Lena sat down slowly on the couch, hand to her chest. I thought I buried that name forever. He wants to talk. To apologize. Maybe be around if you're okay with that. She closed her eyes and for a moment Noah thought she would cry. But she didn't. Instead, she took a long breath and said, if he's telling the truth, he deserves a chance to explain. Saturday came and with it, Elliot holding a large brown paper bag filled with warm dishes from a local deli. He looked different, nervous, careful, more human than the sharp man in the Escalade. Lena greeted him at the door. They stared at each other for what felt like forever. Then she stepped aside and let him in. The dinner was quiet at first, awkward. Elliot told stories about his life, the business he built from a one-room office in Queens to a downtown Chicago investment firm. Lena listened, said little but didn't interrupt. Then Noah asked, "Do you think I look like you?" Elliot smiled sadly. "I think you look like both of us. But mostly, I see your mom in you." Something softened in Lena's face. And for the first time in years, Noah saw her smile like she used to. After dinner, Elliot stood at the door, coat in hand. "Thank you for letting me in," he said. "I know I don't deserve it. But I'm grateful." Lena nodded. "You've got a lot to make up for. But I don't want Noah growing up angry. He deserves the truth. Even if it's late." Noah watched as Elliot stepped out into the cold night, his shoulders straighter than before. Something had shifted, and though the past still cast a shadow, it no longer felt like a wall. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. The days that followed were unlike anything Noah had experienced before. Where once his afternoons were filled with long walks to street corners and the rustle of candy bags, now they were filled with quiet conversations and slow, tentative steps toward something new. Elliot began picking him up after school twice a week, sometimes in his sleek car, other times in a weathered pickup he claimed reminded him of his college days. They didn't do anything fancy, walks through the Lincoln Park Zoo, hot dogs at Portillo's, or just sitting by the lake talking. But for Noah, every minute felt like a world opening. At first, he kept waiting for Elliot to disappear, for the calls to stop, for the silences to return. But they didn't. Elliot was steady, showing up when he said he would, never making big promises, just listening, asking questions, remembering details about Noah's classes, his favorite books, the way he liked his coffee. At home, Lena had grown quieter, watchful but not bitter. She didn't interfere, didn't push, but every now and then Noah would catch her standing at the window when Elliot's car pulled away, her arms folded tightly. There was pain in her eyes, but not the kind that destroys. More like the kind that reopens old wounds and hopes they heal right this time. One Thursday evening, Elliot surprised Noah with a visit to his downtown office. The building was tall, glass-faced, and gleaming under the winter dusk. Noah followed him through the lobby, past security, into an elevator that opened into a wide space filled with floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture. The air smelled like expensive coffee and polished wood. "This is where I spend most of my days," Elliot said, leading him to a large corner office. "But I'd trade it all if it meant I had more time with you growing up." Noah took it all in. The framed certificates, the photos of Elliot with people in suits, some shaking hands, others laughing. Then his eyes landed on a photo that felt out of place. It was him, standing beside his candy stand near the hotel, a little blurry, clearly taken from a distance. "You took this?" he asked. Elliot nodded. "The day after I saw you the first time. I couldn't stop thinking about you. Something about your face. It haunted me. I kept trying to convince myself it was just coincidence, but I had to know." Noah sat in the leather chair across from the desk, holding the photo. "So you already knew before we talked?" "I had a feeling," Elliot said, sitting across from him. "But I didn't want to believe I'd missed so much." Noah's fingers gripped the edges of the frame. "I'm still figuring out how to feel about all this." "You don't have to figure it out quickly," Elliot said. "You've got time. We both do if you'll have me around." There was a sincerity in his voice that couldn't be faked. And slowly Noah began to trust it. One afternoon, Elliot invited Lena to join them for dinner at a quiet restaurant near the Riverwalk. She hesitated but agreed. The three of them sat at a small table by the window. For the first 20 minutes, conversation was stiff, small talk about weather, work, school. Then Elliot reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. "I know this doesn't make up for anything," he said carefully, "but I've set up a college fund for Noah. It's in his name. He can use it however he wants." Lena's face tightened. "You think money can fix this?" "No," Elliot said firmly. "I think responsibility can start to fix it. I want to contribute, not control. He's your son, Lena. You raised him. But I want to be someone he can count on." There was a long silence. Then Lena said, "I don't want you disappearing again." "I won't," he said simply. After that night, something changed. Not everything was perfect, but a quiet peace settled into their lives. Noah began spending weekends with Elliot, meeting some of his colleagues, even helping at charity events his company sponsored. It was there at one such event, a winter coat drive in a Southside community center, that Noah saw the full extent of Elliot's world. People greeted him with warmth and respect. He saw how Elliot listened when a struggling single mom talked about her rent issues. How he helped quietly, without a camera, without fanfare. And Noah realized something. Elliot wasn't just successful. He was trying to be good. One day as they drove back home, Noah asked, "Why didn't you ever marry?" Elliot paused before answering. "I think, part of me never moved on from your mother. I buried myself in work. I told myself I was building something for the future, but really I was running from the past." Noah looked out the window, watching the city blur by. "Do you still love her?" Elliot glanced at him. "I never stopped." Those words stayed with Noah for days. He wondered if Lena felt the same. She never talked about dating, never brought home anyone. Maybe a part of her had also paused her life the day Elliot left. Maybe, just maybe, there was a road that could lead them back, not to the past but to something new. But Noah didn't say anything. He just carried the hope silently, like a secret waiting to bloom. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. Chicago's spring arrived slowly, brushing away the city's hard winter edges with bursts of color and warmth that seemed to awaken even the most tired hearts. Noah felt it too, not just in the air but in the way his life had started to shift from survival to living. There were still questions, of course. There were moments when he looked at Elliot and still couldn't fully believe the man was his father, or that after all those years, the universe had looped back around to stitch them together. But then Elliot would show up with 2 hot dogs and a story from the office, or offer a quiet word of encouragement before a tough math test, and the disbelief would settle down for a while. At school things started changing too. Noah wasn't as guarded anymore. Teachers noticed it. Even his classmates sensed it. He stopped brushing off group projects and started eating lunch in the cafeteria instead of on the back steps. People began to see him not just as the quiet kid who once sold candy on the sidewalk, but as someone with a future. One Saturday morning, Elliot asked Noah to join him for a short trip out of the city. "Just for the day," he said, tossing Noah a backpack. "I want to show you something." They drove north, past Milwaukee, all the way to a small town near the Wisconsin border. The landscape shifted from gray streets and concrete to wide open spaces dotted with barns and maple trees starting to bloom. Finally, they pulled into a long gravel driveway that led to a modest but well-kept house with a wraparound porch. It looked like it had stood there for generations. "This was my grandfather's place," Elliot said as they got out of the car. "He was the one who taught me what it meant to work with your hands. I haven't been back in years." Noah followed him toward the porch, unsure of what to expect. Inside, the house smelled like old books and polished wood. Elliot led him through a narrow hallway, past framed photographs of people with strong eyes and tired smiles, until they reached a small room that looked like a study. On the desk sat an old ledger, the kind people used before computers. Elliot opened it gently, revealing yellowed pages filled with neat handwriting. This is where he kept track of every job he ever took. He built barns, mended roofs, fixed tractors. Never made much money, but everyone in town respected him. He turned to Noah. "I wanted you to see this because I've been thinking about legacy. About what we leave behind." Noah ran his fingers over the brittle pages. "You want me to be a builder?" Elliot chuckled. "I want you to build whatever you dream of. But I want you to know where you come from too. It's not just about money or suits or offices. It's about showing up, doing the work, and keeping your word." They spent the afternoon fixing up the garden, clearing out old brush, and sharing stories about people long gone. Noah felt something settle in his chest, a sense of belonging that was deeper than DNA. That night, as they drove back to Chicago, the sky wide and full of stars above them, Noah asked, "Why did you keep this house?" "Because some things you don't sell," Elliot replied. "Some things remind you of who you are." Back in the city, things continued to evolve. One evening, Lena invited Elliot over for dinner, something Noah never thought he'd see. She made her famous chili and even set the table with cloth napkins, which was her silent way of saying the occasion mattered. Conversation was still cautious, but it was no longer sharp. There were even a few laughs. After dinner, Lena stepped into the kitchen while Noah and Elliot washed dishes. Elliot glanced over his shoulder and said quietly, "I don't expect forgiveness overnight. But I'd like to earn a place here." Noah didn't say anything at first. Then he handed Elliot a towel and said, "You're already here." They stood in silence, the kind that felt full rather than empty. Then Lena rejoined them with an old photo album. She placed it on the table and opened it slowly. There were pictures of Noah as a baby, sleeping in a blanket, gripping Lena's finger, chewing on a toy. And then there was a picture Elliot had never seen. It was of Lena and Elliot from years ago, standing in front of the same house in Wisconsin. They looked young and happy and sunlit. Elliot's breath caught. "I forgot this even existed," he whispered. Lena traced the edge of the photo. "I never did." The weeks that followed brought even more change. Elliot began including Noah in some of his foundation's work. They visited shelters, food pantries, youth centers. And every time, Noah saw another side of him, not just the billionaire but the man trying to make a difference. And it stirred something in him. Maybe he didn't know exactly what he wanted to do yet, but he knew it would involve helping people. Making sure no kid had to grow up the way he did, feeling invisible, unsure, carrying questions that never got answered. One Friday afternoon, as Noah stood by his old candy stand near the hotel, now empty but still upright, he noticed a boy standing nearby. He looked no older than 10, holding a shoebox with a few packs of gum and some chocolate bars. He kept glancing nervously at passing strangers, unsure of how to approach them. Noah walked over, smiled gently and said, "First time out here?" The boy nodded. "My mom's sick. I'm just trying to help." Noah knelt down, pulled out a $5 bill from his pocket and handed it to him. "You're doing a good thing. Just make sure to stay warm. And don't forget, you're not alone, okay?" The boy looked up, confused but grateful. "Thanks. What's your name?" "Noah," he said. "Just Noah." And as he turned to walk away, he caught his own reflection in the hotel glass. Taller now, surer, older than he remembered. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel like he was just trying to survive. He felt like someone who had something to give. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. Noah's days started to move faster than he could count them. School, homework, meetings with Elliot, occasional weekends at the Wisconsin house, and even some afternoons volunteering at a nearby youth center, it all wove into a routine that somehow felt like it had always been there. The gaps in his life, those aching empty spots where confusion and abandonment used to live, weren't gone entirely, but they were smaller, quieter. Still, for all the positive momentum, there was one part of his world that remained unresolved. Lena. Though she was kind to Elliot now, offering tea when he visited, and even asking questions about his work, there was a guardedness in her that never really left. Noah could see it in the way her shoulders tightened when Elliot talked too long, or the way her eyes flitted toward the door like she was bracing for him to disappear again. One chilly morning in early May, Elliot arrived unannounced at their apartment. Lena opened the door, still in her robe, with a slightly amused frown. "What brings you here this early?" she asked. Elliot held up a folded envelope. "I was hoping you and Noah could join me at the Foundation's Youth Scholarship Dinner next weekend. It's a big night, awards, guest speakers, press. I think Noah should see it." Lena looked at the envelope, then at Elliot. "He's still a kid. You think he belongs at something like that?" Elliot smiled. "He doesn't just belong. He's part of it." After a long pause, she took the envelope and nodded slowly. The week passed with anticipation. Noah tried on 3 different jackets before settling on the navy one Elliot had tailored for him last month. Lena borrowed a dress from a friend and even had her nails done. When they arrived at the venue, a downtown ballroom draped in silver and blue, Noah felt like he had stepped into a different world. Waiters in white gloves carried trays of sparkling cider, and string music filled the air like something out of a movie. But what surprised Noah most was how many people recognized him. "You're Elliot's son," they kept saying. "He talks about you all the time." That phrase, repeated again and again, made something shift in his chest. Halfway through the evening, Elliot took the stage to present a new scholarship. "This year," he began, his voice echoing through the hall, "we're launching a program for youth who show remarkable resilience and determination despite overwhelming challenges. The first recipient is someone I've come to know not just as a young man with potential, but as someone who inspires me daily. Please welcome Noah." There was a burst of applause. Noah froze in his seat, stunned, until Lena nudged him gently. His legs felt heavy as he walked to the stage. Elliot handed him the certificate, and for a moment they simply looked at each other. No words, just a quiet understanding. Then Elliot turned back to the crowd. "When I first met Noah, he was selling candy on the sidewalk. What I didn't realize was that he'd end up teaching me more about courage than I ever taught him about success." The applause swelled again, and as Noah returned to his seat, something unexpected happened. Lena stood and clapped harder than anyone in the room. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but there was no sadness in them. Only pride. Later that night, they sat in Elliot's car, parked near the lakefront. The lights from the city sparkled on the water, and the noise of the event had faded into memory. Lena looked out the window for a while before saying, "He's not the same kid, is he?" Elliot turned in his seat. "No. But he never stopped being yours." She looked at him then, really looked at him. "And maybe he never stopped being yours either?" A few days after the dinner, Elliot invited Noah to tour the main office of the foundation. It was in a tall glass building on Michigan Avenue, with sweeping views of the city and walls lined with photos of projects and communities the foundation had helped. But what caught Noah's attention most was a corner room, small and filled with art supplies, computers, and books. "We call this the Idea Lab," Elliot said. "It's for teens who come in with ideas but don't know how to start. I want you to help me run it this summer." Noah blinked. "Me?" Elliot nodded. "You've been through the hard part. Now it's your turn to reach back and help someone else climb up." The thought of mentoring someone, of being the person he used to wish for, both thrilled and terrified him. As June arrived, the Idea Lab filled with kids, shy, loud, creative, anxious. Noah watched them closely, recognizing pieces of his own past in their nervous smiles and restless hands. One boy named Tyrell reminded him of himself so much that it hurt. He was 12, barely spoke above a whisper, and had been caught stealing snacks from a gas station. Instead of calling the cops, the clerk had called the foundation. Now Tyrell came every Tuesday and Thursday, slowly opening up as Noah taught him how to build models and sketch out business ideas. One afternoon, while they were putting together a simple website for Tyrell's comic book concept, the boy looked up and asked, "Why are you helping me?" Noah didn't know how to answer right away. Then he said, "Because someone helped me once when I needed it most. Now it's my turn." That night, Noah walked home past the old corner where he used to sell candy. It looked different now, less like a place of desperation, more like the beginning of something. A memory. He sat on the edge of the planter box and looked up at the city skyline. For the first time, he didn't feel like he was chasing something. He felt like he was part of it. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. Summer in Chicago had always carried a particular kind of magic. Long golden evenings, the smell of food trucks near Millennium Park, the hum of life that spilled into every corner of the city. For Noah, that summer marked the first one where his life wasn't just about surviving. It was about becoming. He had taken the role at the foundation's Idea Lab seriously, even arriving early some mornings to prep supplies or clean up from the day before. The kids, each with their own quiet struggle, had grown to look up to him. And without realizing it, he had become a voice they trusted, someone who understood their stories not as a volunteer or a rich benefactor, but as someone who had lived them. One of the newer kids, a girl named Ashley, had come in with her hoodie pulled tight and her eyes buried in her phone. It took Noah nearly 3 weeks before she finally said more than 5 words to him. She had been kicked out of her last school, had bounced between shelters, and had stopped believing in the future altogether. One afternoon, while showing her how to design a digital flyer for a community art show, she casually said, "You think people like us can really matter?" Noah didn't answer right away. He thought back to the moment Elliot gave him that $1, how that tiny moment had somehow pulled 1,000 invisible strings that changed his entire path. Then he said, "Yeah. I think we're the ones who matter most. We just don't hear it enough." Meanwhile, Elliot was planning something big, something he hadn't even told Lena about yet. He had been spending late nights in his office, sketching blueprints, reviewing old notes, and talking to architects. It wasn't another investment or a project to impress donors. It was personal. He wanted to open a community innovation center. One that combined the Idea Lab with spaces for art, engineering, music, and entrepreneurship. A place not just for support but for inspiration. And he wanted to name it after someone. At first, he considered naming it after his father, but the more he thought about it, the more he realized that the name had to reflect who truly sparked the idea. So one morning, as Noah arrived at the foundation building carrying a box of donated books, Elliot called him into his office. "What would you think," he said slowly, "if we built something permanent? Something that stands long after we're gone?" Noah looked confused. "Like what?" Elliot smiled and turned his computer screen toward him. On it was a 3D rendering of a sleek, modern building with glass walls, a rooftop garden, and bright colorful signage that read, "The Noah Innovation Center." Noah's jaw dropped. "You're naming it after me?" Elliot nodded. "You're the reason I started looking at the world differently. I want that building to remind others that brilliance doesn't always wear a suit or speak from a podium. Sometimes it's a kid selling candy on the street waiting for someone to notice." Word spread quickly, and local news outlets began picking up the story. They were fascinated by the transformation. Billionaire finds inspiration in boy from the streets. They interviewed Noah, and though cameras still made him nervous, he spoke clearly and honestly. "I think kids like me," he said during one segment, "just need one moment where someone believes in them. One chance. That's all it takes." He was invited to speak at a local TEDx event, and though his hands trembled as he stood at the podium, he looked out at the crowd and felt something he never had before: ownership of his own story. At home, things were changing too. Lena had gone back to work part-time at the local bakery, smiling more than Noah had seen in years. She had even started inviting Elliot for dinner once a week, not as an obligation but because she wanted him there. One night, while they were eating pasta in the small kitchen, she looked at Elliot and asked, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had met again sooner?" Elliot hesitated, then said, "Every day. But maybe it wouldn't have worked. Maybe we had to lose everything first to understand what really matters." She nodded, and for the first time in years they both laughed at the same joke afterward. As construction began on the Innovation Center, Noah visited the site every weekend. He wore a hard hat, walked among the dust and beams, and marveled at how something so real could grow from something so random. One morning the project manager handed him a marker and said, "Go ahead. Write something on the foundation wall." Tradition. Noah crouched down, thought for a moment, then wrote, "Even if you start with nothing, you're not nothing." Near the end of the summer, a boy named Miguel who rarely spoke approached Noah after a workshop. He looked down at his shoes, then said, "I used to think I'd never make it out of my block. But now I think maybe I could." Noah smiled and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You already did. You're here." That night, Noah sat on his apartment balcony, looking at the city skyline. Elliot called and told him they had finalized the opening ceremony for October. Noah would give a short speech. There would be guests, donors, the mayor. And Lena would sit front row. "You okay with that?" Elliot asked. Noah looked out at the lights and said, "Yeah. I think I'm ready to tell the whole story now." Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. The day of the grand opening arrived with a crisp breeze curling through the streets of Chicago. The sun hung bright over South Halsted Street, where the new Noah Innovation Center now stood, its glass walls reflecting the skyline like a promise. Final touches had been completed at dawn. Banners with bold colors fluttered at the entrance, while rows of chairs lined up under a white canopy awaited guests. A small stage stood in front of the main doors, backed by a giant screen set to display a montage of the journey from idea to reality. The staff was buzzing with excitement, volunteers checked their clipboards, and the media vans had already claimed their corners for camera angles. But inside, in a quiet room just off the east hallway, Noah sat alone in front of a mirror, straightening his tie with trembling fingers. The suit he wore didn't feel like him. Not yet. He had borrowed it from a neighbor down the hall, one size too big and slightly faded, but it was good enough. He stared at his reflection, trying to believe that he belonged here, that this place really bore his name because of something he had done and not just because Elliot believed in stories. There was a knock at the door. Lena stepped in, her floral dress brushing softly against the floor. Her eyes welled up instantly as she looked at him. "You look like you've already made it," she whispered. Noah grinned nervously. "I don't know what I'm supposed to say up there." She walked over, fixing the collar of his shirt, then cupped his face gently. "Just tell the truth. It's what got you here." Outside, the crowd had grown. The mayor of Chicago had arrived, local business leaders mingled with school kids, and former mentors, teachers, even the owner of the gas station where Noah had once sold candy stood among the guests. Elliot adjusted his blazer as he took the stage, tapping the mic and offering a charismatic welcome. His voice carried warmth and pride. "This center is a dream built by many hands, but it started with a single act. A moment between a boy and a stranger. And today that boy stands before you not as a symbol of charity, but as a builder of hope." He turned to the side and gestured toward the hallway. "Please welcome Noah Ellis." The applause hit like thunder. Noah stepped forward slowly, his hands cold, mouth dry. But as he looked out at the faces, some strangers, some part of his winding journey, his nerves began to settle. He took the microphone, glanced at Lena in the front row, and then began. "When I was 13, he said, I stood on a sidewalk just a few blocks from here, selling candy so my mom and I could keep the lights on. That day, a man I didn't know gave me $1, and when I looked at him, I said something weird. I told him he looked like my dad. He turned around and froze. In that moment, it changed everything." The crowd grew quiet, listening. "He didn't just give me money. He gave me a question. He made me wonder why a billionaire would stop for a kid like me. And later, I learned he was asking the same thing, why a kid like me saw something familiar in someone so far from his world." He paused, then continued. "This building is not about charity. It's about potential. It's about the belief that no one's future should be decided by their zip code, or by how empty their pockets are." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the audience. "I used to think surviving was enough. That if we could just make it day to day, that was good enough. But I've learned that surviving is just the beginning. What we do after that, How we build, how we lift others, that's what matters. There was silence for a moment, then a swell of applause that shook his chest. He stepped down, feeling light as though something heavy had finally been laid to rest. After the ceremony, as people toured the classrooms and creative labs, Noah walked through the building in awe. The music studio had kids testing beats on an old keyboard. In the tech room, 2 teenagers were experimenting with small robots. Everywhere he turned, the place buzzed with life, dreams, and ambition. Elliot joined him near the rooftop garden. "You did great," he said. Noah nodded. "I didn't think I'd ever feel like I earned this." Elliot looked out over the city and said, "You didn't earn it, Noah. You became it." Later that evening, as the crowd began to disperse and the sun dipped low, casting orange light across the skyline, Noah stayed behind to help clean up. As he was gathering water bottles near the entrance, a small boy approached him, maybe 10 or 11, with wide brown eyes and a shy smile. "Are you the guy this place is named after?" Noah chuckled. "I guess I am." The boy reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wrapped candy bar. "I don't have money, but I wanted to give you something." Noah took the candy, kneeling down to meet the boy's eyes. "This," he said, "means more than you know." That night, back in his apartment, Noah placed the candy bar on his desk beside the framed photo of him and Lena from the ceremony. He sat for a long time thinking about the kid, about the dollar, about the way one moment had shaped years of his life. It wasn't about money. It was never really about the dollar. It was about being seen, and what happens when someone finally looks at you like you matter. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. It had been a year since the opening of the Noah Innovation Center in Chicago, and life had changed in more ways than Noah Ellis could have ever predicted. The once struggling candy seller had grown into a man people looked up to, mentors, parents, city leaders, and even kids. He was now not just a symbol of what could be achieved with support and opportunity, but someone actively changing lives every day. The center was thriving. Kids from underfunded neighborhoods were learning code, designing art, building things with their hands, discovering parts of themselves they didn't know existed. Noah spent most of his days there, not in an office but walking through rooms, sharing lunches with students, teaching them how to make presentations, how to ask questions, how to believe in their ideas even when they sounded crazy. One chilly February morning, Noah received an invitation that made him pause. It was from a major tech convention in San Francisco, an annual event attended by global innovators, startup giants, and philanthropists. They wanted him to speak. He stared at the email for a long time before telling anyone. It wasn't fear. It was disbelief. He still struggled sometimes to reconcile the boy who sold candy in the cold with the man people now called a visionary. When he finally showed the email to Lena, her eyes sparkled and she wrapped her arms around him. "You're not going because they think you're a charity case," she said. "You're going because you've built something real. Something that lasts." 2 weeks later, standing on stage in San Francisco in front of an audience of thousands, Noah told the same story he had told at the center, but this time with more depth. He spoke about what happens when someone invests not just in your needs, but in your identity. He spoke about Elliot, the billionaire who gave him $1 and stayed. And he ended with a message that left the crowd silent. The greatest gift you can give a kid isn't money. It's attention. It's the willingness to see them as more than their struggle. The applause lasted several minutes. Afterwards, venture capitalists and CEOs approached him, not to take photos, but to ask how they could help open centers like his in other cities. By summer, plans were underway for a second innovation center in Detroit. Noah was overwhelmed, but he also felt something deep inside shift. This wasn't just about him anymore. He'd become the start of a movement. One morning back in Chicago, as he was sorting through applications for summer programs, he heard the door chime. He looked up to see a man in his 60s, wearing a faded denim jacket, holding something in his hand. The man looked nervous. "Are you Noah?" he asked. Noah nodded. "Can I help you?" The man stepped forward slowly. "My name's Wade. I think I might be your father." Noah froze. For a few seconds the words didn't register. All this time, his mother had only told him that his father had left when he was a toddler and never looked back. Noah had stopped wondering after a while. It didn't seem to matter anymore. He had found purpose without the man. But here he was, standing in the doorway with watery eyes and regret carved into his features. "I saw you on TV," Wade said. "I wasn't ready to come then. I'm still not sure I deserve to. But I thought maybe you should know. I followed your story. I'm proud of you even if I don't have the right to say that." Noah sat still for a moment, searching his chest for anger, but what he found surprised him. He felt peace. "You're not here to ask for anything?" he asked. Wade shook his head. No. I just needed to look you in the eyes once. Just once. Noah stood and offered him a chair. They spoke for almost an hour, nothing too deep but enough to begin understanding. There were no promises, no reunions, just a quiet handshake at the end, and a mutual recognition that life is complicated, but not impossible to repair. That night, Noah walked through the Innovation Center alone. The rooms were quiet, the lights dimmed, and every chair, every pencil, every poster on the wall told a story. Near the main hallway he stopped at the display wall. There, under a glass case, was the original candy box he used to carry, alongside a framed $1 bill and a photo of Elliot and Noah standing together the day they opened the center. He stood there for a long time, thinking about how far that single moment had stretched. When Noah left the center that night, snow had begun to fall, soft, clean, almost magical. Outside, a group of kids were waiting at the bus stop. One of them turned and spotted him. Hey, you're the guy from the center, right? Noah smiled and nodded. The kid reached into his pocket and said, I started selling candy last week to help out at home. Want to buy one? Noah laughed, pulled out a $5 bill and said, only if you promise to finish your homework tonight. The kid grinned, took the money and handed over a chocolate bar. As he walked away, Noah watched the kid's back, his shoulders proud and his steps light. That was the moment Noah realized the story had come full circle. $1 had started it. A child's determination had carried it. And now, a new generation was ready to write their own chapters. The world hadn't changed overnight. But something had. Something small and solid and growing. And in a city that once turned its back on kids like him, Noah Ellis had built a place that said, we see you. You matter. And we're not leaving. If you've liked this story, please subscribe to our channel, like and share with friends.